So just the news this week, the Trump administration has imposed sanctions on Adamir. So I don't know if you heard this, but our really dear friend Sahar Francis, who those of you who've traveled with me have met Sahar at Adamir in Ramallah. The Trump administration has sanctioned them for alleged links to Palestinian terrorism. And of course, it was designated as a terrorist group in 2021 by Israel. That's why we like to meet with them. And so we're thinking of Sahar tonight. I just read this headline this morning. So I've really been thinking about Sahar. I dropped her an email earlier today. Haven't heard back from her, but I'm thinking of Sahar Francis. So we just returned from Palestine and Israel. It was our 18th Solidarity Tour with 17 others. Mostly Christian, a few clergy, a few secular folks, a member of Jewish Voice for Peace from Indianapolis. We walked through East Jerusalem neighborhood of Silwan with Sabil's Omar Harami, talked with Fakhri Diab, whose house was destroyed there last year. They're putting Israel's destroying homes in the Silwan neighborhood so they can build a biblical theme park called the City of David. We saw the big bridge that they built from parks on the one side over to the City of David theme park, and they're going to build, what do you call it? A gondola. We met with a former member of Israel's defense forces for breaking the silence, as well as an Israeli conscientious objector. We also met with Fadwa Barghouti, activist and wife of the Palestinian Nelson Mandela, imprisoned Marwan Barghouti. He's been in prison 23 years now. And also we met with the 3 Nobel Peace Prize nominees, Mazen Qumsiyeh in Bethlehem, Jeff Halper in Jerusalem, and Issa Amro in Hebron, a Christian, a Jew, and a Muslim. 19 meetings in 13 days. You'll hear about some of them tonight. So Morgan Sauer, Kathy Masri, Sara Ofner-Seals, and Pam Etheridge will be telling us about their experiences on our Solidarity Tour. So ladies, take it away.
So, super brief introduction about me, because I feel like it's weird if I don't do that, but I have no connection with Palestine, or at least I didn't, until a year and a half ago. After October 7th, I began attending the protests here in Fort Wayne, and I had absolutely no awareness about this concept, or about this issue. And so I just kind of taught myself, and I came to the Indiana Center events and learned a lot really quickly. And I feel very privileged to have been able to go on this Solidarity Tour. And so what I want to talk about tonight, what I want to share with you guys are a few words that have gained a more significant meaning to me after experiencing Palestine and the people there, hearing these really horrific stories, but then meeting these people who are so kind and strong. It just really impacts you. And so the first word, narrative, right up there, was spoken to us by Sahar Bardi. Sahar is a Jewish Israeli woman, and she is a conscientious objector. So she refused her service for the Israeli military at the age of 18. And as a consequence, she was imprisoned. And so she was speaking about narratives in a way that I thought was so interesting, because she told us that right now in our society, there are 2 popular narratives. The first one is that Jewish people have been so oppressed by everyone for so long that everyone must do everything in their power to keep Jewish people safe, no matter what, at all costs. And the cost now being a genocide of the Palestinian people. And so that's the first narrative, a very popular one, especially among Zionists. And then the other narrative is a pro-justice, pro-liberation narrative, which I assume everyone in this room shares. And it means that never again, the anti-genocide slogan applies to everyone, not just to the Jewish people. And so those are the two narratives that are out there right now. And Sahar told us that her belief is that in order for change to occur, that a new narrative is going to have to be created that appeals to both of these sides of the current narrative. And I just thought that was so interesting. And I understand like what she was saying. And I definitely don't have the answer to what that alternative narrative is, but I totally believe Sahar when she says that that will be the way forward is by finding a new narrative. So we can move on to the next slide. The next word, normalization, was spoken by Jeff Halper. He is a Jewish Israeli American. He was born in America and immigrated to Israel in like the 70s, I believe. But he was talking about normalization in the sense of the oppression and dehumanization of Palestinian people. And so the pictures, I put up on the slide, those are very normal, these normalized images that we're so used to seeing now in the news every day. And it's the destruction and the violence and the killings of Palestinian people. And what I started thinking about when Jeff was talking about normalization was the normalization here in America about this issue, this topic, and the normalization of the issue in the Middle East and how this is too complicated. It's too complicated, the situation in the Middle East, so why do anything about it? It's been going on for so long. Why bother trying to, stop it now? Everyone over there is a terrorist. Like, these are like a normalized concept to us. And I mean, definitely it was what my younger views of the Middle East were. Like, I grew up hearing these narratives, this normalization about the Middle East and Arabic people. So next slide. So samud, a more positive word. Samud is an Arabic word that translates into English to steadfastness or perseverance. And to the Palestinian people, samud it's like everything to them because it means their right to stay on their land, to remain. And the picture that is on this slide is two shopkeepers who live in Bethlehem that me and my roommate Anna met and befriended. Their names are Tamer. He's the one in front in the tan shirt, and then Khalil is his brother. And their story was like most other people's that we heard over there, but what really like broke my heart and struck me was that they said after October 7th, everything got so much worse, so much more intense. All the checkpoints, they increased. They were more heavily guarded. There's more violence, and so they haven't left Bethlehem since October 7th. So for a year and a half, going on 2 years, they haven't left their hometown because it's too difficult and it's not worth it to them. But, being a privileged white person and you hear these horrific stories, I'm thinking like, just leave, like get out of there. Like that's what I would do. Like I would leave the violence and just try to find a better life somewhere else. And to Palestinians, that's not an option for them. The ones that are there, like they are so connected to their land that, and it's all held in this word samud. Like they know their right to remain. And so it's a very bittersweet word, but it's so powerful. And yeah, it was a very, very powerful word. Very beautiful word. So next slide. My last word, community. This is a word that has been on my mind a lot in the last few years. And then going in Palestine again, it just hit hard. This is Tarek Azubi, a very, very well-spoken man. And community is like the definition of Palestinian people. And Tarek's how he gave me the impression of that is by the story from his childhood during the Second Intifada or uprising in the early thousands. His family's home in Bethlehem kind of became a safe space for the members of Bethlehem. They would all go to his house and they would cook together and they would play cards together while right outside their door there's grenades and shootings and all of that. And he recalled the memory of this almost fondly, like he was smiling. And I think it was because that memory of the community that he felt as a young boy growing up with his people, and they're just sharing their existence on their land together. And so again, it's another bittersweet word and a bittersweet story, but it was so powerful, and it really made me even more firmly believe that if there's a way out of all of the problems that we are in right now, it's going to be through community and creating communities like we are doing here right now. So that's it from me. That's all I have to say.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Sara Ofner-Seals. I am the associate pastor here at Plymouth Church. And this was my second trip with the Indiana Center and with Michael. And I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into one of our days on the trip, which was the day that we went to the Solon neighborhood, which Michael briefly spoke about in East Jerusalem, and to talk about home demolitions. So next slide, please. So we're going to come back to this point, but this is Solon. This is part of the neighborhood Solon, and I don't know how well you can see the slide, but what do you notice about the buildings? The eyes. We'll come back to that. So this is what Solon looks like. This is a pretty good representation. Next slide. So it's a Palestinian neighborhood in East Jerusalem. Some of the people living in that neighborhood have lived there for hundreds of years. Others are refugees from 1948. Solon is under growing threat from the settlers that are starting to take over homes in East Jerusalem. They are heavily surveyed by the Israeli military, and we'll see a couple slides about that in a bit. For anyone who likes Bible trivia, the Pool of Siloam is the archaeological site where that is located is nearby. And it is also the site of many home demolitions. So 80% of homes in Silwan and other neighborhoods in East Jerusalem have received either eviction orders or demolition orders. 80% of Palestinian homes in this neighborhood have received eviction or demolition orders. Next slide. So this is the home of Fakhri Diab, a Palestinian man. And we were able to visit with him basically amidst the rubble of his demolished home. It's actually been demolished twice since October 7th. It was demolished once, they attempted to rebuild, and then it was demolished a second time. And the reason given for the demolition was that it was built without a permit. However, Fakhri explained to us that his family, he grew up in this house, that his family owned this property since before the occupation. So it has nothing to do with the house being built without a permit. He thinks he was targeted because he happens to be a community leader. He's been beaten and arrested for his nonviolent resistance, for speaking out publicly. And he has also hosted many international dignitaries, including Anthony Blinken, right here when there was a home there. Anthony Blinken visited, and then shortly after, the house was demolished. Next slide. So as is typical in home demolitions, the family received a bill. So Israel demolished the home, and the family received a bill to pay for that demolition themselves. And they are still required to pay taxes on that home that is now demolished. And just a side note about taxes, when a Palestinian family is evicted from their home in East Jerusalem, and a settler family comes and takes over the home, they pay no taxes on that house. So the Israeli settlers living in this neighborhood are paying no taxes. Meanwhile, Palestinians who have had their houses demolished continue to pay taxes and receive no services for said taxes. So just a little glimpse into the unequal treatment of Israelis and Palestinians in the same neighborhood. Next slide. This is the trailer that the family is currently living in, and I did not write down how many children the family has, so I don't remember exactly, but they have several children, husband and wife, and this is where they're living. And because this appeared on the property without a permit, it is also has a demolition order on this trailer that they're living in. Next slide. So just a few facts about home demolitions. More than 175,000 homes have been demolished in Israel and the occupied territories since 1948. In just 2024, over 1,700 structures were demolished and over 4,000 people were displaced in the West Bank. Demolition rates have accelerated since October 7th. And some of you may have seen this story in the news, but there was in early May an entire Palestinian village in the Masri community was demolished. And among the displaced was an 80-year-old couple. Where will they go? What will they do? Their entire village was demolished. And if any of you have seen the movie No Other Land, Masri is the community of sort of connected villages. And so this village was part of that community. Next slide. So to get a little bit technical, this is another picture. Oh, this is the same picture as before. So to get a little bit technical, almost 100%, 97.5% of Palestinians in the West Bank live in what are called areas A and B. Those are the cities and the surrounding areas in cities. There's 2.8 million people living on land that amounts to less than half the size of Delaware. So people are squeezed into these urban centers. You can see from the picture how crowded these neighborhoods are. As more and more villages are demolished in some of these more rural areas, more and more families are crowded into these kinds of urban areas. And because their homes, their villages have been demolished elsewhere, they need to build. They need to build a home. Maybe they have a home and they have had a couple children and they need to build onto it. In order to build or add to a home, you have to get a permit from Israel, and most of those permits are denied. And so people are forced to build homes without permits or add additions to their homes without permits. But the rule says that if you build without a permit, you get a demolition order. So you can kind of see the cyclic nature of how this just continues to feed itself. And more homes are demolished, more and more people are left displaced. Next slide. So just a little bit of something that we can keep in mind about something we can do here in the United States. BDS is the Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions movement. And one of the targets of BDS has been Caterpillar, because you frequently see Caterpillar bulldozers at these home demolitions and village demolitions. And the Caterpillar D9 armored bulldozer was designed specifically for the Israeli Defense Forces. They've also been used heavily in Gaza, in the current genocide, and they're used to pave the way for ground invasions by clearing roads and demolishing buildings and other structures. Some of Israel's D9 bulldozers, this is kind of a tangent, but have been converted for military use and turned into remote control or semi-autonomous vehicles that can operate without a driver in high-risk areas. So BDS asks organizations like us, for example, churches that have investments, or other organizations that might have investments, to think about divesting from some of these companies as a way of resisting what's happening in these home demolitions. Next slide. So Michael spoke a little bit about this just now, but why Silwan? Why is this neighborhood being targeted? Well, some Israeli historians and archaeologists have insisted that Silwan sits on top of archaeological evidence from the time of King David. And so, as Michael said, plans are already underway. Things are already being built for a biblical theme park called the City of David National Park. And that is sort of one reason given. However, there are a lot of people who will say that there's a larger underlying reason, which is the goal of Judaizing, can't say that word, of Jerusalem, the Judaization of Jerusalem, there you go, which is the expansion of Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem neighborhoods, policies that discriminate against non-Jews, erasing all evidence of Palestinian culture and people, and making Jerusalem an exclusively Jewish city. Next slide, please. So I'm going to end on an up note because I've just talked about a lot of really depressing things. We spent the second part of our time in Silwan with an organization called Eyewitness Silwan, and they're an artist collective, and their resistance is through art. And so the eyes that you saw earlier, a quote from their website says, "The staring eyes say to people that we see them and they should see us too. We want to say that we are here, we love our land and our home." And these eyes are painted on buildings that are slated for demolition. So it's sort of a way for the Palestinians to say, you're being watched, we see you, and the world sees you and sees what you're doing. Next slide. So over 75 murals have been painted on homes slated for demolition as their way of proclaiming their ownership over the home. And next slide. Does anybody have a guess as to whose eyes those might be? Don't answer if you already know. It's hard to tell from just a set of eyes, but it's an American. It's George Floyd.
Wow.
So it's just kind of one of the many places where different liberation struggles intersect. And George Floyd is someone, and his story is one that resonates with a lot of Palestinians. Next slide. And this is the last slide. So this is some of the surveillance that we saw when we were in Silwan and outside of Jerusalem. And these cameras are also equipped with audio recording capability, so they can not only see people, but hear people. And it's worth noting that some of the surveillance technology that we encountered there is being used here at our southern border. And so it's a And, well, you can make of that what you will. So that concludes my portion on Solon and East Jerusalem.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Masri. This was my first trip with Michael. I am 63 years old and somewhat shameful because I've been married to a Palestinian had been married to a Palestinian for nearly 32 years and thought that I kind of understood the narrative about what it meant to be Palestinian and what it meant to live under the restrictions that Palestinians have lived under. And it wasn't until most recently when actually October 7th, 2023, really stirred a fire. By that time, I had been divorced from my husband, but became really, really interested and had an opportunity and wanted to take advantage of this trip to go with Michael. And so after signing up, I did a lot, just started doing a deep dive into some of the history of the Palestinian people and was excited to go on this trip, but nervous just the same. But in hearing my friends talk, it's just kind of reignited this flurry of so many emotions and so many things to talk on and so many things that are important for people to know and to pass on. And it feels like such a big, big job for so few people. And that's what hurts my heart, because it feels like the people that are standing up for the Palestinians are so small. And so I have committed to moving beyond my fears of speaking in public and just being, rather than to being maybe an empathetic witness, to really join a movement that is bigger than myself. And so I appreciate you being here. I wanted to begin, when we were in Ramallah, we were at the Adamir prison support for Bits by Sahar. Francis is who we spoke with. She's a human rights attorney. This organization also is works with empowering women. But when we were there, we were speaking just on her work in the prisons. And so I have a little bit of information here, just statistics. Actually, in the occupied West Bank, there are 2 prisons. One of them is under the Palestinian Authority, civil authority, and the one that holds the most, over 9,000 Palestinians, is run by the Israeli military. Less than 5% of the people who are detained in that prison have committed operations against Israel. Less than 5%. The big majority of them are being held without charge, without jury trial, without even an opportunity to defend themselves, because charges are not even made known to them. And so they're held under what's considered administrative detention. And when asked to describe what kind of mishaps or what the reasoning is for the arrests, most of them are posing a terror threat or unlawful combativeness. And so that's the big majority. And so Sahar told us too that since October 7th, and we heard this really throughout our tour in speaking with the different activists, the different people we were privileged to meet with, almost always they talked about since October 7th or October 7th in 2023 and how things have really just gained momentum and have become so much worse for the Palestinian people. And so before October 7th, Sahar worked to sometimes navigate a really tricky and intentionally made to be precarious Israeli court system because policies aren't defined, they're not consistent, they're not shared with even the detainee, let alone the legal aid or the attorneys representing them. And many times they consider any kind of evidence as secret, and so it's not to be shared, and it doesn't have to be shared. So the court systems are very complicated. They're very expensive, and so especially since October 7th, Sahar is doing most of her work now to document the kind of things that are happening in the prisons. So on this slide, this shows the detention centers, interrogation centers, the military courts, all of which kind of feed into and operate towards, in conjunction with the prisons. So since October 7th, she said that the Army isn't allowing attorneys, not even allowing visitors from the families to come and visit the inmates. They've closed its doors to international fact finders, to the Red Cross, other legal aid organizations that used to be able to help out along with Adamir. And so now they're documenting abuses in the system. And these abuses are being documented by a group of doctors, physicians of human rights who have, in some cases, video evidence, and also prisoner accounts, anybody who has been released as well, have documented physical abuse, which probably comes as no surprise. Prisoners are handcuffed for extended periods of time, continuously, sometimes days or weeks on end. They're blindfolded, beaten by fists and objects, kicked, forced into walls. Their heads are forced into walls, broken bones, made to remain in painful positions in very small holding cells. There is sexual abuse, assault, nakedness, and humiliation is one of their go-to ways of humiliating people. Starvation, the prisoners operate on very small amounts of food, solitary confinement for long periods of time, overcrowding. And she also shared with us that the number one disease is scabies. And so almost all of the prisoners will end up being affected by that. And of course, death. And one thing that she talked about in people have died because of the physical abuse and also the medical neglect, people who are not tended to with maybe cancer or other ailments before they, get there, but they're not medicated. Nobody's watching out for them. also another way of retaliation is with the families outside and the home demolitions again. So it wouldn't be uncommon for prisoners to have their homes demolished as well. And so I did skip over when she talked about over 9,000 people now are imprisoned. Over 400 of those are children between the ages of 12 and 17, which is legal under Israeli law. They have over 1,100 of those are women, and the women and the children are not spared. They pretty much face the same kind of situation as the others. And so even though there's been evidence given to the Israeli high courts, they have not acted to improve the conditions there at all. So in ending our meeting with Sahar, we always had questions and had an opportunity to ask. And she said that the number one thing that we should be doing in the United States is to end the genocide. She asked people to look at and participate in the BDS movement, called on legislators to stop the collapse, along with this United States and Israel together, collapse of international law. And her number one hope is that humanity will prevail. And so Sahar, like many of the people, all of the people actually that we spoke with, who left us with a sense of despair, a sense of hopelessness, and you just think, oh my goodness, how can it get better? And many people said when they think that it could not get any better, something else, transpires and leaves you even more perplexed at the, I guess, human's ability to mistreat a human in such a way. So all of them showed a hope, and a lot of it was grounded in the sense that Palestinians really do have a deep love for their land. And one thing I noticed too, and learned even more profoundly, is the Palestinian story and how it is passed down from one generation to the next, and the history that the families share with their children and their grandchildren. And one of the activists that we spoke with said, even if it takes 100 years, if we were able to begin with the opportunity to police our own borders, we could build from there. We could move from there. And when she said that, I thought 100 years, how in the world? Because I'm thinking this needs to be taken care of. This needs to be ended now. And so, but all of the people that we spoke with did have a sense of hope. And many of them voiced that a kind of a genocide, a kind of attack against another group of people like this, it just couldn't sustain itself. And so coming back, I suppose, from Palestine, I was left with the sense of absolutely, if there was any kind of doubt before, that what's happening to the Palestinian people is at the hands of an apartheid government. There is no question anymore. Because when you have two people sharing the same land who live under completely different laws and policies, and when one of those groups of people is constantly given less, been treated as less, it truly is an apartheid state. And there's so many examples going throughout. So if we could just look at the next, I kind of forgot that I had other. So one of the things that I wanted to, these pictures actually came from the walls of the Adamir Center. And it wasn't just at this center or this stop. I think there's some more in another one if you want to continue to go on. But the women in Palestine really made an impression on me. Because I think about their strength. Men, you are amazing, but I feel like the women are the family caretakers. They're holding their families together. And tens of thousands of women are single breadwinners, or they're holding their families together. They're caring for their families without a husband, maybe without sons. And so I think their stamina and their strength is inspiring. Also, when we were out and about, anytime that we were moving about, it wasn't uncommon to see men or groups of men, even people that we met in the shops and so forth in Bethlehem and in Jerusalem, were primarily men. And so the women are stand behind the scenes, but I just think that they are tasked with so much. And so I think when Palestine has a state of its own and regains their land and regains their freedom and their opportunity for self-rule, I think it's going to be the women who lead the charge and who are the strength behind that. And so I'm a retired school teacher. I'm a mother and a grandmother. And so it's hard to move around Palestine without an eye on the children. And considering what the children, what kind of conditions they're living with, and the things compared to our children, the things they're doing without is soul crunching in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I have to say that the children that we met were joyful and they were upbeat. They were having fun. They were the ones that we happened to see, and not all of them I was able to or did take pictures of because I wanted to appreciate their privacy, and especially the women in the same way. The women don't like to have their pictures taken, and some of them don't like for their children to be pictured as well. But I also think that for the children, the fight has to go on. And these children and their parents even have not grown up and didn't know what it was like to live free. And so hopefully these children will be able to experience that. But certainly my heart goes out to them. So the next one, please. This little guy on the left was in a Bedouin community that we visited. And his grandfather allowed me to take that picture of him. All of the children are curious when they see the white people coming, the visitors coming. We kind of stand out and they're curious about what we're doing there, but yet they're still hesitant and, questioning. But I love seeing them. Okay, next slide. A little girl shirt, take it easy. I just like, take it easy on me. Take it easy on me. And the next one. And so living under the occupation, there were signs all around that made people and reminded people that they were less than, that they were thought of, that we're coming after you almost, And so one of them was the signs there as people are coming into the occupied territory. This road leads to Area A under the Palestinian Authority. The entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden. Dangerous to your lives. It's against Israel law for them even to enter. And of course, the real reason is I think they don't want Israeli citizens to see what lies beyond there in Area A. Also, the checkpoints that are being added to, the roadblocks that are being continually increased, and impromptu road closures that might simply be concrete structures or concrete barriers that are put over roads that yesterday were open. So just the means of keeping people inside of such a small area, and like Morgan had said, and many others too, why not just leave? But their connection to their land is strong enough that even as you see people moving around in and out and going about their day, this is their life, and they've, you know, I don't want to say accepted it, but they're doing their best to move through life and holding on to the dream of one day living free. And so the next slide, please. More deterrence that Sara talked a little bit, you know, about the home demolitions. Where we met with the family on the right, that home was demolished. There was a little corner of the house, the first story of the house that was the kitchen, and that's where we brought our chairs up and sat. Well, they had an order to further, at their own cost, they were under order to demolish the rest of the house then. And so their bulldozers couldn't get in there, and so they were responsible for doing, you know, the rest. And this gentleman that spoke with us wanted to have a place where he came back. His wife can't come back anymore because it's just too sad for her. But he likes to bring his grandchildren. He likes for them to come and to see this is where we live. Even have little bicycles, you know, for the little ones to come, to make it want to be a place where they want it to be. And the next slide. Those are just some pictures of the occupation, and, you know, this is an Israeli citizen. I don't even know really if he's a soldier, but the Israelis and the settlers are given guns by the Israeli government. They're allowed to walk around, and such they do. On the bottom right, we ended up, because the Ben Gurion airport had been closed, or at least a lot of American companies weren't flying in and out of there, so we had to go to Jordan. Passing to Jordan, we had to pay a tax to leave Israel. We had to pay money to go over the bridge, and then transportation costs to go into Jordan, and then for the visa. And the red buses that you see down below, those are filled with Palestinian people who are leaving and coming into Jordan. They might be returning home. They might be, you know, traveling to see family. I don't know what their situation is, but this is a small picture. There were probably 10 or 12 buses that were completely filled with Palestinian people. But those of us who had paid transportation, we were in buses, we were in vans, and we went ahead of all of them. So they all sat there, and they understood that it could be hours before they were allowed to pass through. So another one of those, a big deterrent, but still they persevere. So the next slide. In the middle is this was a yeah, like a checkpoint, a gate that we were going through, that we had to go through. The one on the right, also, I don't think you can see it, but there's a, it's not easily seen. Of course, there's cameras up there, but there's also a machine gun that's mounted up there should it be needed. And up above is a settlement. Used to think of a settlement kind of like tents or trailers and what have you. What I really came to be impressed in not a good way was just the size and the continuation of the settlements and the threat that they pose to the Palestinian people there as well. Okay, the next one. And again, on, Morgan talked about Samud, said the protest doesn't always mean marches, banners, and outright defiance. Matter of fact, most of the resistance shown by Palestinians, over 95% of resistance is nonviolent resistance. When continuing to exist is a political act, and it often involves creative, humorous acts of empowerment. The Samud or steadfastness describes everyday acts of hope and living despite the occupation. It can mean keeping Palestinian culture and community alive, but it's also embodied in simple acts of staying here to work or to attend school. And so I ended with a few of the pictures that, so if you could go to the next one, that to me kind of stood out and represented Samud. On the left is the grandfather and his son that live in the Bedouin community, thank you. And also they are building a school. They don't have permits to build a school, but they do so at their own risk and because the education is so important to them. And so they're able to get their kiddos to this school. It's a very primitive structure, but it's one that they're very proud of and, protect as much as they can. And it's usually built onto or at night. The woman on the right has just passed through a checkpoint. She's on foot. And I would imagine, as I saw her from the bus window, I imagine that this kind of a trip is a normal trip for her to get the kinds of things that she needs for her family for the next meal. And then I love that whatever, her bag too has the word love on it. Okay, the next one. And here's the school on the left in the Bedouin community. Here are some friends that we met, brothers there on the left that were shop owners. They treated us to tea and to sandwiches even when we stopped in their shop. The next one. So people are continuing to work their business as best they can. And right now there's practically no tourism there at all. So people are suffering in that regard as well. And outside of the Admir Center, I looked out the window, and this is blurry because I took it from behind the glass, but this is a shepherd, and he's got his sheep there, and all around him are, old city streets and so forth. So I don't know where he's going next or where he's come from or how long he'll be in this place, but he seemed pretty happy there. And his sheep seemed pretty happy, but to me, it was just one of those things that stood out as unexpected, I guess you'd say. Okay. And the next one. We went to Nelson Mandela Square. It was cool. On the right side was that the Bedouin community where we went, they had these flowers planted. And to me, that was a kind of an act of Samud, because all around them, there are things deteriorating and being knocked down and so forth. And still they plant beautiful things. And the next one, the next slide. So to the left, another way that I was looking for and searching, I do enjoy flowers. Somebody pointed out that a lot of your pictures have flowers in them. The poppy is the Palestinian state flower, and so it grows wild. And out of this, old rock and all around it, things demolished and falling apart. Here these choose to live or have that will or that some mood, I guess you might say, in my mind, to continue to grow. And on the right is our group traveling up to, from, in Hebron to Isa, Amro's place. We couldn't reach there by road because the roads had been either ruined or blocked off. And so we continued to walk. We had a couple of people who were challenged in walking, but they persevered and we helped one another out and we made it to the top. And to the left is an olive tree, which I think is one of the symbols of Palestine. And what I noticed again and again, the olive tree lives for many, many years. And miraculously, I noticed that in many of them, the heartwood or the middle of the tree is decayed or it's missing. And yet the outer part of the tree continues to grow and continues to produce. And so it kind of reminded me in a way, symbolic of the Palestinian people and how their hearts have been torn out. But yet they have the strength, and I think that strength comes from community. It comes from collective punishment, and in collective punishment comes collective community and support. And so I look forward to standing up for the Palestinian people and to learning a lot more about what I can do and continue to pray for their perseverance.
My name is Pam Etheridge, and this was my 4th time on the trip with Michael. And I keep going because once you've been there and meet Michael's friends, they become your friends too. You know, it's just I know a whole lot of people live there, but the ones you meet again and again, and it's just once you're there, you see how they're just living their lives as fully as possible under the militarily enforced apartheid system that does its best to make them want to leave. And so when I come back here, I'm just very much aware of my comfortable privilege, and I'm very uncomfortable with that. Palestinians and their way of life are just under an existential threat, and it doesn't get much clearer than it is at the Tent of Nations farm just outside of Bethlehem. So lots of you know Dawood Nassar, right? Yes, nod if you do. Because Michael's trips always go to visit Dawood at the Tent of Nations. Tent of Nations welcomes visitors from around the world to stay and learn and volunteer. It's a 100-acre farm that Dawood's grandfather, Daher Nassar, bought in 1916 on a hilltop outside of Bethlehem. They have the original deed outlining the boundaries of their property and other legal documents to prove their ownership. And for those 3 generations now, the family has worked the farm continuously. They've paid their taxes faithfully to 3 different colonizers, the Ottoman, the British, and the Israeli. But yet for 30+ years, the Israeli government has been trying to force them off their land. The Nassars have spent over $250,000 fighting in Israeli military and civil courts, scores of times to retain their land. Most recently, their cases continue to be postponed. But even with deed in hand, Israel has variously maintained that it's a forged document, or the farm is on public land, or that it's disputed land. They've been forced to have their land, what do you call it when you surveyed, yes, surveyed many, many times, as if the very first one was no good. So the next slide. That one's sideways. You'll have to turn your head, I guess. Originally, they lived in caves on the land, and they've gone on to build a house and several outbuildings. But the original caves are now used for meetings with visitors like the one on the right, where every group is painted with signs of community and some mood and friendship. The cave on the left is the ancestors' cave, as they call it. It's the largest one. This is a dark photo that's been lightened, but so that you can see the drawings on this central pillar that were done who knows when, but portraits of the original ancestors. Number 3, the next slide. This is a drawing that shows Daher's vineyard there in the middle, the green trees, and all the settlements of the 5 surrounding hilltops. You can see why they want tent of nations so badly. They could connect all the settlements with a single road through the farm. And like Kathy said, these aren't the kind of log cabin settlements we picture with heroic families settling the untamed wilderness, but these are cities of 10,000 to 70,000 people. And the plans to move through the Nassar's land is already underway. The family was just beginning to make wine from their large vineyard in 2018, the first year I was there. And then the settlers burned the vineyard. So they replanted, but grapes need 10 years to grow to maturity to be fully productive. They've had hundreds of olive trees bulldozed by the, let's have another slide. They've had hundreds of olive trees bulldozed by the Israeli military and repeatedly burned by settlers. So they replanted. But olive trees also need 10 years to reach at least the minimal production. They've had over $150,000 of immediate damage and untold dollars of loss in fruit and olive oil production. This picture shows some of the destroyed grapevines with one of the huge settlements on the hill behind the farm. The Nassars have also faced harassment and intimidation and constant attempts to destroy the few physical structures they set up. They have cisterns for water because Israel doesn't allow them access while the settlements water their lawns and have swimming pools. They use solar panels because Israel denies them electrical hookup. And repeated attempts to get building permits have been denied, as they are over all the West Bank. And even building things like retaining walls or fences and digging cisterns on their property have been met with demolition orders, as well as belligerent visits from both the Israeli army and Jewish settlers. 2 years ago, Dawood and his older brother, Daher, were attacked by masked men carrying metal rods and put them both in the hospital for a few days. Next slide. So if you've been to the farm before, you recognize this roadblock that the Israeli military put in years ago. This is where, for the first 3 visits that I was on the tour, you would get off the bus here and climb over and then walk up the road a quarter mile or so to the farm from there. Next slide. Well, now that road has been completely closed off to the farm, and vehicles have to drive a 30-minute longer route around the farm and through a couple villages. Cars and trucks can pass under this overpass, but tour buses can't make it all the way. So now buses have to prearrange to meet a van that can pass under and then go on to the farm. Next slide. This is the view from the side leaving the farm from Dawood's truck, and you can see that they've added these roadblocks that can be moved if the military decides to close even off this roadway entirely. They're preparing for the possibility of needing to live on the farm full-time because they may close it down completely, their access. Right, of course, they live in Bethlehem and travel to the farm because they have electricity and water at home, so they've been commuting to the farm. Next slide. In addition to the roadways being closed, there are now some 90 some of these yellow gates that have been set up to close Palestinian roads at all the villages around Bethlehem. They're controlled remotely. So, and Israel can just decide to close one whenever they choose. And these are in addition to the permanent checkpoints and flying checkpoints that are set up to make life miserable. While Israelis travel freely on roads forbidden to Palestinians all over the West Bank, not just around Bethlehem. Next slide. I don't know if you can read this, and I was gonna bring a laser pointer, but I didn't have any batteries for it. So Dawood recently shared this map in a webinar. It's drawn up to show what the settler efforts to take over the farm look like, and which are increasing rapidly since October 7th. The green area in the center is the farm. The green boxes are talking about two different land plots that have been separately registered. The red boxes show Israeli buildings, settlements, a huge yeshiva, a right-wing ultra-Orthodox school close to the farm, settlement outposts, containers or trailers, and electrical infrastructure built right along the farm fence line. So you can see how that's surrounding it. Blue boxes are talking about existing roads. And the dotted blue line going right through the farm is what they fear shows the path of a new road that's underway and will cut off access to 60% of the farm. They'll be left with the buildings out front and the, composting toilet things, but the majority of their acreage and most of the tillable ground will be, what Israel wants, and so they'll get it. Next slide. So with all eyes on Gaza, settlers are now very bold and aggressive. And here are the containers or trailers that settlers supported by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. They've moved right up beside the fence, beside the Nassar fence. And these are outposts that are the start of settlements. So what happens is that once Israelis live there for any amount of time, they soon bring military to protect them full time. And then there are soon military safe zones that are set up around the settlement that swallow up more farmland within a fenced boundary. Next. Settlers have also cut through the fence and walk around on the farm property. When Dawood walked out to confront these young boys here, they had cut through the fence, but they said they must have gotten lost. And there's nothing that he can say other than, well, watch your way better next time. They want to keep things quiet, they don't want to confront people. And they also don't want to be enemies, so it's difficult. The picture on the right is one that Michael shares from his Stones Cry Out tour in March, when settlers were walking through the farm property with AR-15s slung on their backs. We saw the same thing, not uncommonly in Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Settlers walking along through the marketplace with their family in tow, wearing their AR-15s like I wear a purse. Provided to settlers by the Biden administration and our tax dollars. Yeah. Dawood says that international volunteers who come and stay for a week or more and work on the farm are their main protection now. And because there haven't been many visitors because of, the fear of being able to get in or get out. When people can come and visit, they are not only working on their farm, but they're also keeping an eye out for settler intrusions and things like that. And they're also witnesses and kind of serve as a deterrent. The farm used to have a 2-week summer camp for kids with music and art and dance and learning about the land, farming, and nature. So many families have lost their farms to settlements for not having the legal deeds that to their property, like the Nassars do, or from being cut off from their property by the wall that was built or by settler-only roads. And once they can't tend their land, once the lands are left unattended for 3 years, Israel follows an old Ottoman law saying that abandoned land for 3 years becomes state property. So the camp gave kids a chance to learn their own history and connection to the land. But they stopped the camps because of COVID, and they haven't resumed them because now it's hard to get the kids to the property, along with the uncertainty about getting them home again. If they find one of those gates closed. So it's very difficult right now. What more difficult? I don't know. Next picture. Here are the beginnings of roads being laid out, set to go right through the farm. While the Nassars jump through all the hoops of the legal system, the settlers have free rein. You can see the Tent of Nations fence on the far right with the bulldozer just ready to move through. Next slide. This is the view from the back of the farm at night now. I would imagine that the sky used to be a sea of stars. Now it's a sea of lights from the settlements. It's just hard to fathom, there's no way to quantify the damage that's being done, what all's being stolen, and what all's being lost. Next one. Indigenous Palestinians have a connection to the land, like we've all said, but it's something that we colonizers of the Americas don't understand. We've lived here for a few generations, but our ancestors came from lots of other places. Genealogy is an American pastime. It's interesting to find your roots and see where all your ancestors are from. But Palestinians go way back generations and generations. Their families have lived here all that time. So that deep rootedness is also what they're actively working to hold on to. Daoud and his wife Jihan have 3 adult children who are pursuing college degrees and careers that continue that rootedness. Through one's working toward peaceful political solutions with NGOs in the West Bank. One is working in a West Bank medical facility, and their son is improving and expanding the science and use of solar power in the West Bank. He's studying to do that. Existential threat or not, right? Daoud told us that they don't really expect justice, but that they're going to exhaust the system trying. They hope that by taking action, they're inspiring other people by their peaceful perseverance to keep their family land. They're empowering others. That persistence and resilient steadfastness is also part of Samud in Arabic, a deeply felt calm determination that's part connection to the land and part connection to each other as a people, knowing that they're the people of this land, the indigenous people. We don't have a comparable English equivalent for Samud, but you feel it and know it when you're there. So the motto of Tent of Nations as you enter the farm in Arabic, English, and German, we refuse to be enemies.
So folks, I'll moderate the questions, but we'll turn it over to the speakers to engage with you all. So who would like to ask the first question? Please, Frank.
Does Hamas have a presence in the West Bank?
Does Hamas have a presence? Well, I'm going to ask you all to repeat the question. Does Hamas have a presence in the West Bank?
Yeah.
So the question, does Hamas have a presence in the West Bank? Not that we were able to discern. The presence there is really the Israeli military.
Paula.
I think even though they don't have a physical presence that we were aware of, the knowledge of what was happening in Gaza is seeped through just about every aspect of the Palestinians' lives. I don't think they really differentiate themselves very much from the Palestinians who live in Gaza. And so the pain of those people are the pain that these people, in the West Bank carry as well.
Paula, I saw your hand.
I have a question about the
Could you stand, please?
Okay, the demolition orders, I had a couple of questions about those, like, how are they notified about that? Like, are they given a certain amount of time? Is it a piece of paper? And then the second question is the taxes, what would happen if they don't pay their taxes? Would they go to the prisons that Kathy showed us about, and the my question?
The question was about home demolitions and how they're notified and how much time they have. And I can speak to that Daoud Nassar at Tent of Nations said that sometimes they've found a demolition order tacked to a fence, way out in the orchard or something, and they may have just a few days to respond when they find it. So they've had to start patrolling the perimeter to make sure they haven't had a demolition order. But I don't know, the time period of how long they have to respond. But apparently, there are lots of people living with the demolition orders and they just keep living and hope that they don't ever show up. The second one was about taxes, and if they don't pay taxes to the Israelis, what happens? And that one I don't know either. Do you know?
We don't know. And I meant like the taxes on the demolition homes.
Oh,
You talked about, you know, how you said they have to pay taxes on the homes that are demolished still.
Right.
I don't know what happens if they don't pay their taxes. If anybody else knows,
Speeds up the demolition.
it speeds up the demolition, Michael says.
But I thought they paid taxes on they were already demolished.
They continue to have to pay taxes.
So they didn't, you know, I'm assuming they voted.
Then they get deported.
Or, okay, they can get deported.
Here you go.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, Paula. So the tax situation, they have to continue paying taxes even after the home's demolished, but then they can be removed. So if they stop paying taxes, they're removed. Virtually immediately. Yes, Jeff, please.
Especially there in the areas called settlements, is there a kind of general sense that you know of whether where best hope would be a two-state solution or a one-state solution?
I'll say something and then I'll pass it to anybody else who wants to speak.
Repeat the question.
Oh, the question was, is there any hope in, especially given all the settlements, in a two-state solution at this point?
Or what would,
Or,
they have a general sense of one or the other?
or one state solution, or is there a preference between one or the other? I think a lot of people that we talk to would say that the two-state solution is just completely unfathomable now because of how little land there is that the Palestinians have been crowded into and how much land has been annexed by Israel. And so how would that, when you have 700,000 settlers living illegally in the West Bank, there are generations now that have been living illegally on this land. How are you supposed to have a two-state solution when you basically have this archipelago of cities, like little islands, little Palestinian islands in what is mostly an area controlled by Israel? Some people talk about a one-state solution, one single democratic state with equal rights for everyone. But that also feels like a pretty distant reality because certainly the Israeli government, as it currently stands, would never allow for that to happen. Does anybody else want to speak?
I just want to say that too, that it seems pretty apparent that the Israeli government is doing everything that they can to make sure that there is not an avenue for the Palestinians or for any freedom. I mean, they're practically giving this land and then supporting any settlers that come there. I mean, they're given the land free, they're given protection, they can act out in any way that they want, and still they are, the army is required to protect them. So I think they're making it pretty impossible and clear that their idea of a one-state solution would just be Israelis on their own.
Next. Please.
How hard is it to get in and out right now of Israel, Palestine? Do you have, can you say exactly, can you tell them what you're gonna do, straight up, or do you have to have a story?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Would you
Yes, I will repeat it. How difficult is it to get into Israel, Palestine? So our experience with it was that we were Coach, thank you. That's what I was looking for. We were coached before we left. What we tell the what's it? Border control. Yeah, customs. Uh, what we were to tell them why we were there. And so we told them that we were there on a Christian pilgrimage tour. And you know, Michael's very adamant about not lying. And so everything that we were told to tell them, places that we were staying, sites that we were going to visit, that was all true. We stayed at the hotels that we were told, the Ron Beach Hotel, the Gloria Hotel. We stayed there. All the sites that we saw. But we purposely left out a lot of things that we did and saw. And so, yeah, getting in, if you don't tell the full truth, is possible, not too difficult. And yeah, you have to be very intentional about what you say. And then it all just kind of depends on how easy or not it is for you to get in and or to leave. Oh, yeah, you do have to apply for a permit to get into the country. So yeah, it's, you know, they ask you who your grandfather was. It's like, what? Why? Why do you care about that? But like they are looking for your families, like to know whether or not you are from an Arabic family. You know, because if you're from an Arabic family, you know, oh, you're probably a pro-Palestinian, you know, supporter. So yeah, it's interesting. It's different and weird.
I'll just add that applying to get into the country, that's new as of January 1st. So those of you who've traveled with me in the past, we never had to do that. This past January 1st, now you have to apply, and then they give you, it takes a little while, and then they give you permission to get in. Who else? Yes, please.
Where is this for, starting from Fort Wayne?
What are ways to support Palestine in Fort Wayne? Well, this organization right here, the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace, come to their programs, their webinars. There's a weekly protest on Tuesdays at 5 outside the courthouse. What are some other ways?
We have mission partners there on the ground who we support financially.
Yeah, so Indiana Center supports a lot of these folks financially. So your gifts to Indiana Center also support a lot of these Palestinians on the ground. I will say that personally, I have been participating in a fast for Gaza with Veterans for Peace over the last 22 days. There are people all across the country that are participating in this, and I would say you can join. Go to veteransforpeace.org. There's still 18 days left that you can join the fast, and you can call say your senators, your representative. You can email the White House. You know, continue to bug our members of Congress. And I know it seems sometimes like that's a fruitless endeavor, and maybe it's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But I guess my perspective at this point is if they're gonna be silent and if they're going to not take any action, I'm at least going to bug the hell out of them.
On Sunday, Reverend Timothy talked about 400 people dying from starvation a day. And did you see starving children? Did you see the hunger?
We did not, because we weren't able to go to Gaza. We also had in our original plans that we would go to Nablus, but because of the more dangerous conditions there, we weren't able to go. But certainly in Gaza, nobody is going, you know, into Gaza. So no, everything that we see is what we see on the news. And so I think it's important to kind of select your news agencies and to find out, you know, where you can learn and find out the most. And so the other thing that, our guests, our host, I should say, emphasize to us is to continue to, tell the story of the Palestinians, by reading podcasts, different news agencies. Al Jazeera is a really good one that is, accountable and truth tellers. So, but they also said every opportunity that you see to stand up for, human rights, to do that for the Palestinians, but also in any regard.
Please.
There are two, at least two questions. Who are the leaders in this country that support Palestine? Because the Democrats disappointed the hell out of me, right? And then, my other question is, where are the Israelis that are pro human rights?
You want to repeat the question then?
The first question was who in the US is, in the US government is supporting the Palestinians. And it's not a great number of people, but I would say Bernie Sanders for sure. Bernie blames Netanyahu, but Rashida Tlaib, of course. Ilhan Omar, sure. Andre Carson from Indianapolis, yes, and several others. But it's tough to get it's a tough gig out there. The other question was,
Jewish voices of conscience.
oh, Jewish voices of conscience. There are many in the US. Jewish Voice for Peace, Brant Rosen from Zedek, Chicago, rabbi. They're a very progressive synagogue. He has a blog that's very good.
There's several Jewish organizations.
Yeah, If Not Now is another Jewish organization. There are many.
But in Israel?
In Israel, there are probably some.
We met with some.
Oh, yes, we met with some, sure. Jeff Halper, Sahar Vardi,
Gideon Levy.
Gideon Levy, yes, a journalist who is outspoken and well-spoken for Haaretz. Yes.
And go along with that, I read the bulletin and you said that you met Jewish leaders. And what I'd like to know is what do those Jewish leaders have to say about what's going on, how Israel is what they're doing?
The question is, we met with Jewish people, Jewish people who are Jewish. And the question is, how are they, what did they have to say about what's going on? All the Jewish people that we spoke to were pro-Palestine, who've seen, at some point, come to recognize what's happening there, what the Israeli government is doing. Because we don't want to conflate the Jewish people with Zionism and the country of Israel, that ideology. One's an ideology and one's a faith. Just like I don't want to think of us as a Christian nation, although there are those who really want it to be that, only their own style of Christianity. So,
White Christian nationalism.
yes,
That's what I use.
yes.
Any of the other ones want to add that?
I will add just one book that I will highly recommend is by a Jewish American named Peter Beinart, and he wrote a book called Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, and I think offers a very a really insightful perspective from a Jewish person who is opposed to what's happening.
And I think he only in the last couple of years has been, he used to be an apologist for Israel. I think just in the last couple of years, he's really changed it. But he also has Peter Beinart. He also is Jewish Currents, I guess, right? That you find online, podcast and a weekly thing you can subscribe to.
Josh,
Yeah,
We have
Josh Rubner's
we have
another.
time for maybe one or two more questions. Yes, please.
I'm curious because, the weapons that are killing all the Palestinians come from the United States predominantly. Did you get any, you guys are part of the problem if you're there or not?
I think that all of the hosts that spoke with us differentiated between the US government. None of them had high regard at all for President Trump. And so they differentiated that, but they also understood that the United States, the policies of the United States are directly responsible, largely responsible for what's happening to the Palestinian people there. And so again, take your good fight, keep fighting the good fight is what we heard over and over again. Yeah. We were never put in a position where we felt like we had to apologize. I mean, they understood that we were there in support of Palestine and against the policies of our government.
Just a side note to that, something that I found kind of remarkable, when we would be speaking with Palestinian, various faiths, various backgrounds, we heard multiple times when we would ask the question, what can we do when we get back home? The answer was, well, you guys have your own problems to deal with. So they're very aware of American politics, the fact that not all of us are in agreement with what's happening.
I think too, many people pointed out the fact that here our government is sending billions of dollars to a country to orchestrate a genocide, and at the same time, we have so many people that are unfed and unhoused in our own country.